What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about 5 awesome smartphones to pick up in that $400 price range. So most of these will be 400, but I do have a few that are under 400. So let's start off with the OnePlus 9. Now you can find this guy for 427 renewed or refurbished, and I think that's an excellent price for what you're getting with this phone. It's got a glass back on here. It actually has a plastic frame, but it still feels premium in the hand. It's IP68 for the T-Mobile version, the official rating for that. Now you also have a very nice fluid AMOLED display, completely flat, 120 hertz, HDR10 plus panel, 6.55 inches, and then it's 1080p 402 for the PPI. Overall, I really like the panel, very high quality panel, the 120 hertz, buttery smooth on here, and you have a punch hole on the left hand side. So overall, I really like the screen on this phone. It's also upgradable to Android 12 with the Oxygen OS 12. Now, I definitely think the highlight with this phone is the Snapdragon AAA processor with the Adreno 660, which basically means this phone is blazing fast. It's just as good as the the latest Gen 1 processor basically, so it's extremely fast. You can play all games at high settings. This phone does not have any SD card support. 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM on board on this guy. The stereo speakers were actually very loud, good bass quality, crystal clear for that. You also have NFC. The under the display fingerprint sensor is really fast, and overall just Oxygen OS is just clean experience on here. I think that's one of my favorite features of this phone. Now this phone does have a pretty good camera setup. I thought the cameras were pretty good on here. It's got a 48 megapixel standard, 50 megapixel ultra wide. I thought it took some of the best and most detailed ultra wide shots in any phone. And then it has a 2 megapixel monochrome camera on here, and they also have the Hasselblad color calibration on here as well. So it's 8K for 30 on this phone, and then you have a 16 megapixel selfie cam, 1080p 30. Image quality I thought was really good on the OnePlus 9. Battery life also was pretty good on here. You can easily get all day battery life. It's got a 4500 milliamp battery, and what's actually crazy about this phone is it has 65-watt charging, and you actually get the charger in the box, which is insane these days. You also have wireless charging on board too, so the OnePlus 9 is definitely a great buy to consider. Next is the iPhone 11, very solid older flagship phone. Really like this phone. It's got an aluminum frame, it's got a glass back, still a very nice looking design, feels great in the hands. It's IP68 dust and water resistant. This one has a 6.1 inch Retina IPS display. It's a 720p plus display, 326 for the PPI. For the average person, the display is fine. I do wish the display was a OLED display, but for an IPS panel, it gets fairly bright, and overall it's fine. Display size is pretty good on here as well for people who don't have massive hands. But really the highlight with this phone is the Apple A13 chip. It's still extremely fast on this phone. It can still game at the highest settings. It's going to be running the next versions of iOS for a very long time, so you don't have to worry about future updates. And also you get a 64 gig internal version and 4 gigs of RAM for the base model, which I think is a little low, but it is what it is. You also have crazy good stereo speakers on here, ton of bass, just sounds excellent, very full sounding speakers. Of course, NFC is on here, Face ID works really great as well too. So there's a lot to like. I think the highlights is definitely the A13 chip and then the camera. So you have the dual camera setup, 12 megapixel standard, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It shoots in 4K 24 30 60, and then the 12 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 4K 24 30 60. Excellent video on here, excellent photos on here, zero complaints about image quality. I think this still takes absolutely great photos, so if you're worried about image quality, do not. This takes awesome video and photos still for an older flagship phone. I think it could even beat some mid-rangers today at its price point. So this phone has pretty decent battery life. I think you could squeeze around 6 hours of screen on time out of here. It is a smaller battery, but it really depends on your battery health. So you have a 3110 milliamp battery, 18-watt charging, and your wireless charging. I was able to get through the day with this phone, so you're not going to get a day and a half, but you should be able to squeeze a day out of this phone. Next is the Poco F3. I would like to get this phone for you guys for the channel, but you guys have not shown a ton of interest in Xiaomi phones, so I was wondering if you guys actually want to see this device, because the price has actually come down well below $400. It's around $300 now. And it's, on paper it looks like a great device. I'm really curious about this device. So it's got a glass back, plastic frame, it's IP53, dust and splash proof. Very impressive display at 6.67 inches. It's an AMOLED display at 120 hertz, HDR10 plus, 1300 nits peak brightness. So it's an excellent display. It's in 1080p though, 395 for the PPI. So overall display looks really nice. You have a really small punch hole. It's an Android 11 with the MIUI skin on top of it, of course. And then we have, I think the highlight with this phone is the Snapdragon 870 processor and the Adreno 650 on here, which basically means this phone has a flagship chipset. It's a beast. Performance wise, it's going to perform exactly like a flagship when it comes to gaming and just bouncing in and out of applications. It's just going to feel very fast. There's no SD card support, unfortunately, on this phone. 128 gigs of internal storage and 6 gigs of RAM is on board. Your stereo speakers are on board. Infrared port is actually on board, which I love, and then your NFC. The fingerprint scanner is side mounted on here as well too. And from what I've seen, the camera setup is pretty awesome as well. It's a 48 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide with a 5 megapixel macro, and then 4K 30, and then a 20 megapixel selfie cam that shoots in 1080p 60. This phone also has a 4520 milliamp battery, very decent size, so you should definitely get a full day's battery life. And then you have 33-watt charging, which is awesome as well too. So the Poco F3, let me know what you guys think. I think it's an awesome device to pick up. All right, next is the Galaxy Note 10 Plus. You can pick this up for around 400 bucks, slightly below, but they're usually trending around that price point, around 400 bucks. So this is just an awesome phone. I cover this phone a lot on the channel. It's just got a beautiful design, aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. Of course, you have a built-in stylus with the Note. Also have a beautiful 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display. It's HDR10 plus, 1440p display, so super high res display at 498 for the PPI. So just a beautiful boxy, design on here with a punch hole in the middle. You also have on this phone Android 12 with One UI 4, the Snapdragon 855 and the Adreno 640. Believe it or not, this phone still performs like a flagship device. It's very fast. You can actually still play pretty much any game at high settings. Check out my gaming test. Very impressed with performance. So you're not really missing out anything as far as feature wise. You have Samsung desktop support, NFC, your secured folders, all the little bells and whistles are on here. In addition, you have micro SD card support, 256 gigs of internal storage, and 12 gigs of RAM on the base model. You also have stereo speakers on here, which sound excellent. And then you also have NFC on board with a fingerprint scanner under the display, which also works very fast. The cameras on the Note 10 Plus are also pretty good. It has a 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, and then a 16 megapixel ultra wide, and then you have a 0.3 TOF depth sensor. It also shoots in 4K 60 with a 10 megapixel selfie cam that also shoots in 4K 60. As you can see, image quality pretty good on here, especially if you're in good lighting. You get tons of detail, great color science on here. So I have no issues with the Note 10 Plus camera. I think it has aged fairly well. Now you also have on here a 4300 milliamp battery with actually pretty nice fast charging for an older phone, 45 watt fast charging with wireless charging and then reverse wireless charging as well. So the Note 10 Plus is an excellent phone for people who want the built-in stylus with a pretty design and still fairly powerful. All right, last I wanted to throw in the LG V60. This is well below 400 bucks, around 300 bucks. If you wanted a new one, it would probably be 400 bucks, but you in the used refurbished marketplace, it's easily 300 bucks. This is just an awesome phone and a very unique phone for people. So it's got just a beast of a design. It's very, very sturdy design. It's aluminum frame, glass back, IP68 dust and water resistant. It also has a massive 6.8-inch display. It's POLED at HDR10. 1080p 395 for the PPI. It's a great looking display. Like I said, very big phone. Mine has Android 11 on it. It's got the Snapdragon 865 chip, so it's still very fast. And in terms of gaming performance, launching applications, scrolling, all of that feels very smooth. And you also have micro SD card support, 128 gigs of internal storage and 8 gigs of RAM. In addition to that, you also have just some beast of a stereo speaker setup on here, super loud, great bass quality, and you also have a headphone jack with a quad DAC on here. That's another highlight. And then the next highlight with this phone, it actually has dual screen case capability as well. So if you want to turn it into two phones, basically, you can do that. So the V60, as you can see, has a lot of stuff going for it for such a cheap price point. Now, the V60 also has a pretty good camera setup. It's got a 64 megapixel standard, 13 megapixel ultra wide, and then a 0.3 depth sensor, along with 8K video at 30 frames, and then a 10 megapixel selfie at 4K 30. Image quality just looks very good on here. Great natural colors. I compare it to newer phones all the time, and it does an excellent job, as you can see from the photos. The fingerprint scanner, not the fastest, but it gets the job done. It's not, like I said, not the fastest, but it does get the job done. And you do have very, very good battery life on here. A 5,000 milliamp battery, wireless charging on here. This phone easily gets you, for me, around 2 days of screen on time, so it's very impressive. And I think that it's mostly due to the 1080p display and it being 60 hertz. But yeah, the battery life is outstanding on here. So yeah, so the V60, awesome phone. So check out these phones. I have them in the link down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.